Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too join the Prime Minister in wishing yourself and all members of the House, and indeed our entire community, a very happy Easter. This week is Autism Awareness Week, and I welcome the work of the National Autistic Society and others. Mr. Speaker, I hope the whole House will join me in paying tribute to the families of Connor Sparrowhawk and Theresa Corbyn for their dignity in campaigning for answers about the deaths of their loved ones at the hands of Southern Health. Last week, the Health Service Ombudsman said too many patients suffered failings in mental health care involving violations of the most basic human rights of patients. How confident is the Prime Minister that deaths like Connor's and Theresa's could not happen today?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he does raise a very important point. I think that, first of all, there have been significant steps taken in raising awareness of autism and ensuring that there is support available for those who are on the autistic spectrum. But the very sad deaths we saw of Theresa Corbyn and Connor Sparrowhawk do raise very real questions. I join him in paying tribute to the families for the way in which that they have campaigned on this particular issue. And obviously these incidents took place some time ago, and lessons have been learned by the health and social care system as a result of the failings of Southern Health NHS Foundation Trust. The government is supporting NHS providers to be open, to learn from mistakes so that they reduce the risks to future patients and prevent tragedies from happening. But a comprehensive CQC inspection into Southern Health is expected later this year.
Jeremy Corbyn.
The Ombudsman, Rob Behrens, also said, and I quote, "There aren't enough skilled and qualified staff. There is a problem in recruiting them, and there is an overuse of agency staff." So, Mr. Speaker, could the Prime Minister explain why there are 5,000 fewer mental health nurses than there were in 2010?
I say to the honourable gentleman, right honourable gentleman, as he knows, we have already committed to improving mental health services on the ground. We are putting extra money into mental health services. I'm pleased to say that around 1,400 more people are accessing mental health services every day compared to when we came into power. And of course, it is this government that has ensured that we've given parity of esteem to the treatment of mental health in the National Health Service and are increasing the training and recruitment of people to provide those mental health services. This is about the NHS, it's also about services in our communities. And it's also about ensuring that we can intervene at an early stage for those young people who develop mental health problems, which is why I'm pleased to say I was pleased to launch the initiative for there to be training in schools so there's a member of staff who's able to identify mental health problems and able to ensure that young people get the support they need.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, in 2012 the Health and Social Care Act did indeed embed parity of esteem into law, thanks to a Labour amendment introduced in the House of Lords. But sadly, the money never followed. The charity Rethink Mental Illness said recently our overstretched services are failing. ITV's Project 84 campaign highlights the horrifying figure that male suicide is the biggest killer of men under 45, 84 taking their lives every week. Earlier this month, the Health Secretary said the Prime Minister and I have made mental health services a personal priority. Now, Mr. Speaker, I fully acknowledge and accept the Prime Minister's very genuine concern about mental health, but mental health trusts have got fewer resources. So why does the analysis by the Royal College of Psychiatrists show mental health trusts have 105 million less than they had 6 years ago?
To the right honourable gentleman, as I've just said, of course, dealing with mental health is not just a question of what is happening inside the health service. There are wider areas of responsibility for dealing with mental health. What have we done on mental health? Yes, the parity of esteem is there. As I said, 1,400 more people are accessing mental health services every day compared to when we came into power. Spending on mental health has increased to a record £11.6 billion, with a further £1 billion by 2021. We are ensuring that we're putting more money in. We have responded to the report of the Stevenson-Farmer review into mental health in the workplace. It's all very well Labour members chuntering about this, but dealing with mental health means addressing it in a variety of ways. We are taking more steps to address the issues of mental health than the Labour government ever took when they were in power.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, mental health spending fell by £600 million between 2010 and 2015. And far too often, a mental health crisis has to be dealt with either by police, friends or neighbours or people in the community, and too many of our fellow citizens suffer alone because there are insufficient staff to help them at a moment of crisis. It is quite clear that the mental health budget is insufficient. So can the Prime Minister explain, and she mentioned young people in this, why only 6% of the overall mental health budget is spent on children and young people when they make up 20% of our population?
Say to the right honourable gentleman, as I've just repeated, we are in fact increasing the services that are available to children and young people. But this isn't just about what happens in NHS trusts. It's important we look at this in the round. That is why it's important that we're putting ensuring that there is that training in schools to help young people. We've committed to ensuring 70,000 more children and young people each year will have access to high-quality NHS mental health care by 2020-21. We've backed these proposals by additional funding, the work that we're doing in schools and how they deal with mental health for children and young people. But we're also taking action in other areas. When I was Home Secretary, one of the issues I saw was the fact that the police found it very difficult to deal with people in mental health crisis because they didn't have the training to do that, and actually taking them into a cell to be there overnight, including young people, was not helping those young people. We have changed that. We've seen a dramatic reduction in the number, and we have made clear that young people will not and will never be taken to a police cell as a place of safety.
Mr. Speaker, I fully acknowledge the work the police do in helping people in a mental health crisis. My point is there should be more mental health professionals to help people in a crisis. Half of all enduring mental health conditions actually materialise before the age of 14. Spending on child and adolescent mental health should be a priority. Instead, sadly, the number of child and adolescent psychiatrists has fallen by 6.3%. There has to be a priority in fully staffing our children's and young persons' mental health.
That was a statement, not a question.
I'm not aware there was a question at the end of that, Mr. Speaker, but I will repeat the point. No, the issue of young people's mental health is a very serious issue. That is why the right honourable gentleman is focusing on one aspect of this. That is why we are ensuring that we do start to address this at an earlier stage. He's right about the a high proportion of mental health problems that start before somebody is age 14. It's exactly why we are doing more in our schools, why we're working to ensure that we do have that training for teachers. But there's a wider issue here that I'm sure that everybody in this House will recognise. Because when I go and talk to young people who have developed mental health problems, when I hear from them about the problems that they're facing, sadly, one of the issues that puts increasing pressure on the mental health of young people today is the use of social media and the bullying and harassment that they get on that social media. And I hope that he will join with me in saying that we need both to help our young people have greater resilience in dealing with that social media bullying, but we also need to ensure that we see social media not being used in a way that leads to mental health problems that could well be with those young people for the rest of their life.
Jeremy Corbyn!
I hope, in the light of what the Prime Minister just said, she will support our digital bill, which will ensure that there are proper protections for people. Mr. Speaker, a young woman wrote to me this week who's been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and is regarded as a high suicide risk. She was told to wait 3 months for an appointment. That was cancelled and she had to wait a further 3 months. It is very hard to explain to someone in that situation why they have to wait all those months for an appointment while they're in a very desperate situation. Mr. Speaker, mental health affects us all, and it's welcome that there is now much less stigma surrounding mental health. However, our NHS is in crisis. The crisis is particularly acute in mental health services. Despite legislating for parity of esteem, the government has failed to fund it. We have fewer resources for mental health trusts, fewer mental health nurses, fewer child and adolescent psychiatrists. So will the Prime Minister commit to ring-fencing NHS mental health budgets to support those going through a mental health crisis at a time they most need our help and our support?
And I say to the right honourable gentleman that the National Health Service is receiving extra funding from this government, extra funding for mental health and extra funding for other services. Since November, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has announced an extra £10 billion which is going into our NHS over the next few years. Why are we able to do that? We're able to do that because we take a balanced approach to our economy. That means keeping our debts down. It means ensuring that we are investing in our public services like the NHS and mental health services, and actually keeping taxes down for ordinary working people. Labour's approach would mean increased debt, it would mean less money for mental health services and higher taxes for working people, and ordinary working people would pay the price of Labour.
Mr. Peter Heaton-Jones.